Sometimes, the scariest stories aren't found in books or movies. They're buried deep in the mountains, whispered around campfires, or passed down in hushed voices by the people who've lived there for generations. Before I begin, I need to warn you, this isn't some campfire legend or internet creepypasta. This is something I lived through, something that has haunted me every single night since. And once I tell you this, you may never think of the Appalachian Mountains the same way again. So, if you're listening right now, stay with me until the very end. Because what I'm about to share is more than a story, it's a warning. And if you've ever thought about venturing deep into those woods, you need to hear it. It started about 3 years ago, during the fall. I'd always been drawn to the Appalachian Mountains, the history, the folklore, the kind of eerie beauty you can't find anywhere else. I wasn't a tourist, exactly. More like a wanderer. I liked hiking, camping, and exploring places most people avoided. That's how I stumbled into the kind of trouble I'll never forget. I remember driving into the small mountain town just before dusk. The kind of place where the gas station doubles as a diner, and everyone looks up when a stranger walks in. The people there were friendly, but cautious. Like they knew something I didn't. At the counter, while I was paying for a hot meal and some supplies, an older man with weathered hands leaned toward me and asked, "Where are you headed, son?" I told him I was planning on camping near an old trail that locals didn't seem to use much anymore. The man's face went pale. He shook his head and muttered something I didn't catch, then said more firmly, "Best steer clear of that ridge. Nothing good comes out of there. Folks go up, but they don't come back down the same." I laughed it off, thinking it was just small-town superstition. But then a woman at the next booth chimed in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't go near the mine," she said. "The ground remembers. The mountain remembers. And it don't like to be disturbed." I should have listened. But instead, I smiled politely, paid my bill, and went on my way. Because at the time, I didn't believe in curses. I didn't believe in monsters. I do now. That first night, I set up camp not far from where the trail split. One path was overgrown, leading up toward the ridge the locals had warned me about. The other followed the river. And even though their words were still rattling around in my head, I felt a pull almost like curiosity was guiding me straight toward the ridge. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, the woods grew unnervingly quiet. No birds. No crickets. Just the sound of my own footsteps and the whisper of the wind through the trees. That was the first time I felt it. The sensation of being watched. I can't explain it better than this. Every hair on the back of my neck stood on end, like electricity crawling through my skin. And when I looked back at the tree limb, I could have sworn something moved. But at the time, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just the woods playing tricks on me. I didn't know then that I'd just taken my first step into something I couldn't escape. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear something, twigs snapping, leaves shifting, the low creak of branches moving against the wind. But the wind had died hours earlier. Around midnight, I sat up in my tent, holding my breath. The forest was dead quiet. Too quiet. Then, it came. A sound I'll never forget. A low, vibrating hum, almost like the wings of a massive insect, carried on the still air. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either. Just, somewhere out there in the trees, circling. I froze, waiting. But after a few minutes, the sound faded away, swallowed by silence. When I finally drifted into uneasy sleep, I dreamed of red eyes glowing in the dark. But when I woke just before dawn, heart racing, I told myself it was just exhaustion messing with me. The next day, I hiked deeper along the ridge, ignoring every voice in my head that told me to turn back. The trees grew denser, the trail narrower. Moss clung to fallen logs, and the air felt heavier, damp with a kind of stillness that pressed down on me. By midday, I stumbled onto something I hadn't expected. The entrance to an old mine. It was carved into the side of the mountain, partially collapsed, half swallowed by vines and undergrowth. A rusted sign leaned against a boulder nearby, so weather-beaten I could barely make out the words. But the date was clear enough. 1913. I remembered what the woman in the diner had said. Don't go near the mine. The ground remembers. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the black hole in the rock face, fighting the urge to step closer. It felt wrong. The air coming out of it was cold, too cold for late autumn. I backed away, deciding I'd set up camp further down the ridge. But that night, the noises came back. I was lying in my tent, listening to the whisper of the trees, when I heard it again, the heavy, slow beat of wings overhead. Only this time, it was closer. Branches cracked. Leaves rustled. Something massive shifted in the shadows just beyond the firelight. I grabbed my flashlight and shined it toward the tree line. At first, I saw nothing. Just the skeletal outline of the woods. But then, 2 points of red light blinked back at me. Not glowing like an animal's eyes catching the beam. These were burning, steady, fixed directly on me. My breath caught in my throat. The light swayed slightly, like whatever they belonged to was moving with an impossible, fluid grace. Then, with a sharp snap, the sound of wings thundered through the night, and the eyes vanished. I sat there, frozen, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Every instinct screamed at me to pack up and leave. But some part of me, the part that had led me here in the first place, whispered that I needed to see this through. That was my first mistake. The next morning, I woke to find my campsite disturbed. Not trashed, not destroyed, but moved. My backpack was 3 feet from where I'd left it. The fire pit stones had been shifted, just slightly, like someone had picked them up and put them back wrong. And the trail of boot prints leading toward the mine? Those weren't mine. I should have left right then. But instead, I did the stupidest thing imaginable. I followed them. The prints wound through the trees and stopped at the mouth of the old mine. Standing there in the daylight, I could see more clearly. The entrance was framed by rotted support beams, dark with age. Chains dangled from rusted hooks, swaying gently though there was no breeze. The air pouring out of that tunnel was colder than ice, carrying with it the faint smell of metal and damp earth. I flicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. The moment I crossed that threshold, the silence hit me. The forest outside might have been still, but inside, it was dead. Every sound I made echoed too long, bouncing back like whispers. My light scanned the walls, jagged stone, old tool marks, abandoned equipment half buried in rubble. At one point, I found a rusted helmet lying on its side, cracked straight through. I bent down to pick it up, but the second I touched it, I swore I heard something. A voice. Not clear, not loud. Just a faint murmur. Like a man groaning in pain somewhere far down the tunnel. I froze, straining to listen. The beam of my flashlight shook against the rock. For a second, the sound faded, and I convinced myself it was in my head. But then it came again. A low, ragged moan, drifting out of the dark. I should have turned and run. But instead, step by slow step, I pressed deeper inside. The deeper I went, the colder it grew. My breath came out in pale clouds, even though the day outside had been mild. My flashlight beam cut across the tunnel until it caught something on the wall. Writing. Dozens of names, carved into the stone. Some fresh enough to look only a few years old. Others worn down, almost illegible. And then, below the last set of names, were 3 words that sent a chill down my spine. He still watches. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the light. My heart hammered in my chest, and for the first time, the thought finally slammed into me. This wasn't abandoned. Not really. Something was here. That's when I heard it. The scrape of claws on rock. Slow. Measured. Deliberate. I swung the flashlight toward the sound, but the beam only illuminated more jagged walls and collapsed beams. The noise stopped. And then, came the wings. That same deep, vibrating hum I'd heard the first night, only louder now, filling the tunnel until my bones seemed to rattle with it. I spun around, desperate for the exit, but the light caught something before I could move. 2 burning red eyes, hovering in the darkness. Closer this time. Watching. I stumbled back, tripping over the helmet I'd left behind. The beam of my flashlight swung wildly, and for a split second, I saw it. A towering figure, hunched to fit the tunnel, its wings brushing against the stone. Not a man. Not a bird. Something in between. And it was smiling. That smile, if you could even call it that, froze me where I stood. Its mouth wasn't shaped like ours. It was jagged, stretched too wide, almost like it was carved into its face. And those eyes, they weren't just glowing. They were alive. Like burning coals that pulsed with each breath it took. For a second, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The thing crouched there in the shadows, its wings half unfurled, scraping against the stone. The tunnel filled with the sound of them shifting, leathery and rough. The way a bat's wings sound magnified 1,000 times. Then it stood. I stumbled backward, the beam of my flashlight trembling across its body. It was massive, easily 7, maybe 8 feet tall, its form shifting as though it was wrapped in shadows that refused to hold still. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But when I turned toward the exit, I realized something horrifying. The tunnel behind me was gone. No, not gone. But the dark had swallowed it, stretching the distance like the mine itself was warping around me. I broke into a run anyway, boots crunching against gravel, flashlight bouncing wildly off the walls. Behind me, I heard it move. Not quickly, not hurried. But steady. Like it knew I couldn't escape. The air grew colder the further I went. My lungs burned with each gasp, and the beam of my light started flickering, stuttering like the batteries were dying. Then, ahead of me, the tunnel split. Left. Right. I didn't think, I just chose one and kept running. That's when the voices started. Not whispers this time. Clearer. Dozens of them, overlapping, rising and falling with pain and anger. Men's voices. Screaming. Begging. I stumbled to a halt, spinning the flashlight in every direction, but the tunnel was empty. The sound was inside the walls. And then, above the screams, I heard it again. The wings. Something brushed against my shoulder. I whipped around, light flashing across jagged stone, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the red glow, further down the tunnel now, swaying like lanterns in the dark. I ran. The passage narrowed, forcing me to squeeze through, scraping my arms against the rock. I could hear it behind me, closer now, its breath rattling like a furnace, the scrape of its claws gouging the stone. The air stank of sulfur and rust, thick enough to choke. And then, the tunnel opened into a chamber. It was vast, the ceiling lost in darkness. My flashlight revealed rusted carts, rotted beams, and bones. Dozens of them. Human skeletons half buried in the rubble, their skulls twisted toward the ceiling, jaws frozen in silent screams. My stomach lurched. I staggered back, nearly dropping the light, and that's when I heard the sound that still haunts me. Laughter. Not human laughter. A low, broken sound that rattled the chamber, bouncing off the walls until I couldn't tell where it came from. I spun in circles, flashlight beam darting across the carnage, until it landed on the far side of the chamber. The eyes. Brighter now. Closer. And above them, the shadow of wings stretching wider than the chamber itself. I turned and bolted, scrambling over bones, tripping on rotted timbers, the light flickering so badly I could barely see. Behind me, the wings thundered, sending blasts of air down the tunnel. The voices screamed louder, like the mountain itself was alive, like it was feeding off my fear. My legs burned, my lungs screamed, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. And then, just when I thought the darkness would consume me completely, the tunnel sloped upward. I saw a faint glow ahead. Daylight. With every ounce of strength I had left, I sprinted toward it. The sound of wings followed me, louder, closer, until it felt like they were beating inside my skull. The red eyes burned in the dark behind me. And then I was out. I burst from the mouth of the mine, collapsing onto the ground outside, gasping for air. The forest was silent again. Too silent. I staggered to my feet, looking back into the tunnel. It was empty. Just black stone and shadows. But as I turned to leave, one last sound followed me out. A single beat of wings. Slow. Deliberate. Like a promise. Didn't stop running until I reached my car. Branches clawed at my arms, stones cut into my boots, but I didn't care. Every step, I swore I could feel it behind me. Watching. Waiting. When I finally slammed the car door shut and turned the key, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it steady. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of that gravel lot faster than I've ever driven in my life. Only when the mountains were fading in my rearview mirror did I finally start to breathe again. But that was 3 years ago. And still, even now, I can't sleep without seeing those eyes. Sometimes, late at night, I'll be walking to the kitchen or staring out my window, and I'll catch a flicker of movement in the dark. Sometimes, I swear I hear wings beating in the distance, just faint enough to make me question my sanity. And sometimes, I wonder if I ever really escaped that mine. Or if part of me is still down there, wandering in the dark, with the voices and the bones and the thing that waits. People call it a legend. The Mothman. An omen of death. A harbinger of disaster. A story parents tell their kids to keep them out of the woods. But I know better. I saw it. I heard it. I felt it breathing in the dark. And if you ever find yourself in those mountains, if you ever stumble across an old mine carved into the ridge, remember this. Don't go in. Don't even get close. Because the ground remembers. The mountain remembers. And so does he. If you made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. But don't forget, not every legend is just a story. Some things are real. And some things are still out there. So if you want to hear more encounters like this one, more horrors buried in the shadows of forgotten places, make sure you stay with this channel. Subscribe, share this with someone who needs a chill tonight. And whatever you do, never ignore the warnings. Because the next set of glowing red eyes you see in the dark might just be looking at you.